turn this down.
You know what else the squigglies are showing me today?
What?
Who's talking more?
What do you mean?
Well, because they're separated.
Oh.
So I can see who's doing all the talking. Or it's me.
Crime solved.
Right?
Welcome to Crime Crazy, the weekly true crime podcast with Aaron Plime.
And Jordan Middleton.
We're switching. We're switching everything. Where we prove
that you don't have to know a lot, that we don't know anything about our legal system. Daggone it.
But we're still crazy for a good, true crime story. Well, I'm going to ask you, how was your week so far?
Good. Have we switched bodies? What's happening here?
Yeah, I'm getting this rolling.
My week was great because we celebrated.
Yes, that was so fun.
It was weird.
Okay, so we didn't take any pictures, guys, because it really, like you said, it wasn't really like a picture type of place.
No, it was not a picture take. It was too solemn or something.
In the car, I was going to take a picture and be like, on the way there,
right,
type of thing.
Right.
But we went to see The Psychic yesterday.
We did. We went and saw a psychic.
It was fun. I always like going. Aaron is still a skeptic.
I'm still a skeptic.
But
I thought he did a pretty decent job reading us and figuring out
what we
were
were still
to.
A little things that he knew that was like I didn't even know. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So how would me, such an angel that I am, being here all the time, I didn't know some of the things he mentioned.
About me?
Yeah. Like when the book part came up, I was like, I didn't know you wanted to do that.
Oh, well,
I knew you did it, but I didn't know that was like a thing.
He said I should quit my job and become a writer. Really bad career advice.
That'd be so fun, though.
It would be fun, but I'd also go crazy. I don't know that I could work exclusively out of the house like that.
Well, no, because you'd be one of those weird, edgy, whatever writers at Barnes and Noble who go and write there, or Starbucks and cafe write, with a light noise in the background.
But yeah, it was very interesting. I wasn't not thrilled. I wasn't thrilled. I wasn't mad, but I'm not having another kid. We're good.
I swear, if you get another kid, I'm gonna be like, ha!
He was absolutely positive we were having a fourth, and it was a boy.
Yeah, and he said, yeah, it's leaning towards a boy. I was like, yes.
Well, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, I have 2 boys and a husband.
Yep.
And a daughter, and no more beds in my house.
That's true. I guess the baby would have to sleep on the couch.
Well, he didn't say it was a baby.
Oh, that's true.
It could be
a human kid.
Right. A human kid.
Well,
and my answer is just right. Yeah.
I felt about the alien baby.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's
why I was a human kid.
Right. My sister's having an alien.
I
mean, that's what it looks like at the moment.
They all look like that.
Right. Eventually, it'll look like a human kid.
Yeah.
Right now, it looks like an alien.
Not a goat kid.
Probably not a goat kid. Maybe a puppy.
Aww.
With her firstborn, she was so tired in the week after he was born, just absolutely exhausted all the time, that she dreamt one night that she got up because he was crying, and she went downstairs or into the room with his crib and looked in the crib, and he wasn't a baby, he was a puppy.
Whoa. That's my dream come true, but yeah, that's probably scary.
Jordan's that's how it should be.
Not in a crib. But
well, I don't know. You cook your animals food and
only when they're sick.
Throw them birthday parties.
Well, yeah, that's happening this week too.
I noticed that Julius was my friend, but
hey, I was getting to the invite.
Sure.
I'm just saying, you're more than welcome to come, but you can't bring your husband because my other dog doesn't like men.
No.
So literally, I'm only inviting the girls. That's it. Because Mike's not home, and I feel bad about that. But
right,
that's just what we're gonna do.
Only girls.
The girls are gonna come over, so feel free to swing by.
Okay. All right.
Presents are not needed.
I was gonna say, what do you get a Great Dane for its first birthday?
Jenna got Frankie a bunch of big toys. And I was like,
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
so much. Because we go through toys so fast.
Yes.
I was like, this is going to last so long. Okay. Off dogs. Well, guys, you would know this. We always talk
It's
about dogs.
always dogs.
Sorry, guys.
Dogs every week. This is the dog and true crime story show. So Jordan, I know I'm going first.
Yes.
But before we do, is there anything you didn't cover that you looked up and you didn't do this week? I know there is.
There is. And I might dedicate myself to do it another time. But it was about, I'll give like a little sneak peek. It was about a transgendered woman who changed her gender because the male version of her was violent.
Oh.
Yeah. So very twisty, like.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
did like the hormonal change, like.
she just kept saying, well, no one could stop him. So that's why I changed. So now he's gone. I feel like it's a very like
interesting.
more of a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll definitely do that one day
Interesting.
once I can
When
get
you
all the information together.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to now.
Yeah.
When you started saying that, it reminded me of a story that I researched, but I don't think we've ever done, about the woman who pretended to be a man and had a couple of husbands. No, had a couple of wives.
No, I think we've talked about it.
Have we done it on here?
I don't think we've officially
okay.
done it.
I know
think
it's
we've
in my
talked
crime
about
book.
it. Yeah, no, I think that's what we
Okay,
talked
yeah.
about.
That one was a really interesting one too. I'll have to do that
Yeah.
sometime. That was very interesting because it took place a long time ago, and I don't think it was a matter of being a transgender.
I feel like I do know this story. Did we do it?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'll have to look and see if
shit.
I record, like, because I always write down like when we do them.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't a matter of being transgendered. It was a matter of just dressing like the opposite sex and living like the opposite sex, not because you were the opposite sex, but because men had it better. And she wanted things out of life. So,
Well, shit.
I mean, really.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear your story.
Yeah, so I had one I didn't do too. Not that you were going to ask or anything.
I thought that's what the one you were just talking about.
No.
What?
No, the one I was going to do. The one I was going to do was the one that was like both of our stories last week, sort of a murder for hire kind of thing.
I did know that.
And it was this guy who had written a book and then gone on to kill his wife. And I looked it up, and there weren't any like great details that made me like really invested in the story. So it ended up just being another, it actually wasn't even murder for hire. Like he actually went in and killed her.
Oh my
But
God.
it just was
So
the
very
same
similar.
as all the other stuff that we've been doing lately. So I found one that's not the same.
Ooh. I know when you were texting me about it. That's why I'm like excited to hear about it.
Yeah, I was reading it and I got goosebumps and I was like, ooh, this is the one we're doing.
Okay. I'm like not ready, but I'm ready.
All right, it's kind of long.
Okay.
All right, it's called The Nutty Professor.
Great movie.
Well, yes, this is nothing like the movie.
I hope not.
All right, so it's about this woman. Her name is Amy Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a neurobiologist at the University of Alabama.
Oh.
45 years
Roll
old. Dark hair, long pale face, 4 children. She'd been a high achiever since high school. She was an accomplished violinist, or an accomplished.
Yeah. Married the two words together.
Right. When she was younger, and then she received her PhD from Harvard.
Ooh.
And although there were some people that said she kind of like scraped by, she didn't do so well in the PhD program,
But still.
and maybe shouldn't have even gotten her PhD, but just sort of
shit.
somehow did. Anyway, she had a stable marriage. She had no criminal record, no history of substance abuse. Her parents were married her whole life. She had one sibling, Seth, which we'll come back to him later. And the only other thing about her, she had allergies and asthma as a child and spent some time in the emergency room. She would get like hives and different
that
things.
sucks.
Yeah. So, normal woman.
Yeah.
Okay. But then at 3:00 on February 12th, 2010, she was at a meeting. Okay, so she had gotten her PhD and she had gone to work at the University of Alabama as a neurobiologist. She was a teacher, And so or she was a professor there.
Yeah.
And then she just also was doing research and all those things that like PhDs do at a university. And so she was in a faculty meeting with 12 of her colleagues. It was like the head of their department, the assistant head of the department, and then like 10 other professors and scientists and grad assistants, and just they were having like a department meeting.
Mm-hmm.
No big deal. She went to these all the time, and usually she was pretty lively. Everybody seemed to like her. She was a little bit maybe not maybe eccentric. She was a little bit strange.
Okay.
But everybody pretty much liked her. So usually in these meetings, she would talk a lot and be really boisterous. Well, in this meeting, she didn't talk at all. She just sat there and like looked at her lap, and she was brooding, and she was really upset. But everybody knew why. And the reason was she really didn't need to be at this meeting, because the whole topic of this meeting was what they were going to be doing in the department next year. She was not going to be there next year because she had applied for tenure and it had been denied. They'd voted against her. And so she got to finish out the semester, and that was it. And then she wouldn't have a job anymore.
Oh, God.
And she was really upset about it.
And they made her sit in that meeting?
Well, they didn't make her. She came to the meeting, but she didn't need to be there. Like she could have just not gone, but she went. It might have been kind of like a protest thing. Like, I just want you to see how upset I am kind of thing. So one of the women in the meeting was named Deborah, and then her last name looks like Moriarty, but it's Moriarty. Like it has an extra I in it. It's really hard to say. I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
No.
Anyway, she was a friend and another professor, and she actually had voted against Amy, and Amy knew this.
I'm like, you're not my friend.
Well, but so Amy knew, but she didn't really begrudge her that. Like they were still friends. But she did tell Deborah that she was really upset. She felt like her life was over. Now she was going to have to look for another job, and she didn't want another job. And
my best friend voted against me.
well, I don't think they were best friends.
Well,
I think they were
I'm
just
being dramatic.
friendly. Yeah. Yeah. And this bitch
My
at the
ally.
office. Right. So she was there at the meeting too, and she was actually thinking during the meeting, I should really check on her and see how the job hunt is going. Like she looks really miserable, whatever.
Yeah.
So the meeting is about to come to an end, and before it is time to stand up and leave, Amy stands up, and so everybody looks at her. She pulls out a 9mm Ruger semi-automatic, and she shoots the department lead in the head.
Oh my God.
Yup. Department lead falls down. She shoots again. Department assistant, dead. Then she shoots Adriel Johnson, who's a cell biologist. And she's standing between all of these people that are in this meeting and the door. So everybody's like panicked and they're looking at the door. And her friend Deborah's like, she didn't even figure out what was going on. Like she was just in total shock. And she didn't realize what was going on until she shot the next person, Maria Davis. And at that point she was like, oh my God, she's killing people. Like it took four kills before she realized what was going on. So she dove under the table, and she crawled under the table over to where Amy was, and she like threw her arms around her legs, and she's like, what are you doing? You have to stop. And Amy points the gun at her. And she's like, no, think of my daughter. Think of my children. Like, we know each other. You can't do this. And Amy pulls the trigger. And the gun goes click.
Oh, no.
And she pulls the trigger again, and it goes click. It had jammed.
Oh, shit.
Right? So Deborah crawls on her hands and knees out of the door.
Yeah.
And the whole way, Amy's following her and shooting and shooting and shooting at her. But the gun is just hopelessly jammed. So then Amy stops to like fix it. And Deborah manages to get away. She gets with some other people inside of a room, and they like barricade themselves in. And so Amy, I guess she shoots a couple more people. It said she shot 6 people total.
Oh my God.
And then she just very calmly, 3 of the people died. She very calmly goes downstairs to the ladies' room, rinses off the gun, takes off her jacket, wraps it all up, throws it all away, and then walks into a lab that's nearby, and there are some students in there, and they don't know what's going on, and she asks one of them if she can borrow his cell phone to call her husband for a ride. She calls her husband and says, I'm done, you can come pick me up. So a few minutes later, she walks outside. So the whole shooting only lasted a minute.
Yeah.
But a few minutes later, she walks outside to go, I guess, get in her husband's car. And of course, the cops are already there. So they arrest her right there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very strange because she didn't have any of the warning signs. She's not that like stereotypical like Columbine mass shooter, postal worker who's lost it kind of thing. She was just a woman. And at first people were like, well, it had to be the stress. She must have like cracked under the pressure. Like, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Except the next morning after she's arrested, the sheriff's department gets a phone call from a man named Paul Frazier, who's the chief of police in Braintree, which is the town that Amy grew up in, which is in some other state. Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
I think it was near Boston. Yep. And Frazier says, that woman that you have in custody, I thought you might like to know, in 1986, she shot and killed her little brother. Yep.
Oh my God.
So the police start looking into it, and here's what they found.
Oh my God.
So when Amy was little, she had a little brother named Seth. He was born in 1968. He was 3 years younger than her.
Mm-hmm.
By all accounts, everyone who knew them said they got along really well, that Amy was a little bit competitive, but she was really into music and science, and Seth was really into music and science, and they always would hang out together and do stuff together, and they got along. They didn't fight. Like, they were just normal kids. And in an interview, Amy said, oh, you know, we love each other, whatever. And then in 1985, when Seth was 17 and she was 20, the grandfather died. The dad's dad died. Mm-hmm. So they're all still living together in the same house. Amy's at school. Seth, I guess, is probably still in high school. Grandfather dies. They go to the wake. And when they get home, one of the downstairs windows is open and the curtains are blowing out, which they didn't leave it that way. So they go in the house and it's just been destroyed. Somebody has come in, or probably a couple somebodies, and they've just cleared the place out.
Oh my God.
So they started in the kids' bedrooms and they took the pillow slips, probably like carry stuff, and then they went around the house and they stole all the valuables they could find. And the like most important things were, the mom's name is Judy. So Judy's wedding ring was at home for some reason. Like maybe it didn't fit her, or she just didn't wear it most of the time. Yeah. So they stole that. And then each of the kids had a little silver cup to like commemorate their birth.
Oh yeah.
They stole both of those.
Oh.
They kind of all dealt with it different ways. Judy wrote a letter to the newspaper, which they published, and in it she basically said, you know, we're not mad, but we just please bring our stuff back. Those are some very meaningful, irreplaceable things that you took. Yeah. Like, you know, keep the rest of the stuff, but we really want our precious things back. Yeah. And her dad, Sam, dealt with it by driving to a sports shop and buying a shotgun. So Judy and Amy were not thrilled to have the gun in their house.
Yeah.
At one point, Seth did show Amy how to load it, so I guess they didn't put up too much of a fight. It got to stay in the house. Sam kept it in his closet, the dad, unloaded in the back of the closet, and then he kept all of the ammunition on his dresser outside of the closet, so like he could, if somebody came in, he could get to it, but it wouldn't be like there ready for an accident to happen or anything like that. Anyway, they thought, you know, they should never have to use it or anything else. So then, over a year later, December 6th, 1986, there is a frantic 911 call from Judy Bishop. She says, my daughter shot my son, and I saw everything, and he's dying, and you have to come.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So when the police get there, she tells her story as like they come, the paramedics come and they take Seth away to the hospital because he was still alive when they arrived.
Oh, okay.
And she tells her story to the officer. She says, so that morning I got up, or this morning I got up And I left the house around 6, which was normal for me, because I own an old horse, and it lives like in the next town over. I stay, it's like boarded at somebody else's farm. Okay. But I like to go out there and take care of him. So we exercise, and I clean him and brush him and, make sure he's fed and all that kind of stuff. So I do that pretty much every day. That's my morning routine, and it takes a couple of hours, and then I come back home. She said, so, I left around 6, and at first she said she went and did all of that, and then she got back home by noon-ish, because she had come in the house, and she was thinking that she was hungry, but there wasn't any food for lunch, and so Seth was like, well, I'll go to the grocery store. But then her official story later, when she told it, was that she got home at 2, and Seth was pulling in from the grocery store right behind her. So it was sort of significant that it changed, because it kind of made a difference in Amy's version of events. Yeah. But no one ever really brought it up. It didn't end up mattering. Oh. Because, she doesn't, it didn't matter. Yeah. It wasn't enough for anybody to be concerned about the discrepancy in her stories. Oh, okay. Anyway, so she says that she came in around 2. Seth came right behind her. He had just gotten back from the grocery store, so she helped him carry the groceries inside. And that when they got into the kitchen, Amy was coming down the stairs carrying Sam's shotgun. And she said, there's a shell in the gun, and I don't know how to unload it. And Judy said, well, I told Amy, don't point the gun at anyone. Like, be careful where you're pointing it so nobody gets hurt. And Seth was like, oh, here, give it here. I can take it out for you. And so she turns to hand him the gun. And Judy said that she had one hand on the barrel of the gun and one hand on the stock. So no fingers near the trigger. Mm-hmm. And she's just going to hand it to Seth. But when she turned, the gun went off. And since they were standing close enough for her to be handing him this gun, it just shot him point blank in the chest. Oh, my God. And Judy said he had enough time to, look at her and say, oh, no, Mom. And then he fell back. She said it was like a fountain of blood coming out of him. Ugh. And it was just horrible. And so she grabbed the phone and called 911, and the officers got there, right away. So when they got there, Seth was on the floor and he was bleeding, and Amy was not there. She was gone. And
would she leave?
Yeah. So they put out an APB. Yeah. And they found her really, really soon after that at an auto body shop that was kind of right around the corner. And this was interesting too, because according to the official police report, they found her and they brought her in and they questioned her, and then later they let her go home. But then once all of this stuff happened with her office and this definite homicide, and they started looking into it again, and they talked to some of the officers that were there, it turns out that really Amy had been trying to steal a car from the auto shop, and that witnesses there said she pointed the gun at them and said, put your hands up, and I'm going to take a car. And they all left. Everybody ran away. Mm-hmm. And when the police arrived, she refused to put the gun down, and they had to sneak up behind her with one guy distracted her while somebody else snuck up behind her, and then they were able to arrest her.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So she was taken to the police station, and Lieutenant James Sullivan interviewed her, and this is what she said. She said that morning that she had been alone because right after her mom left to go take care of the horse, her brother and her father also left. And she didn't say where, maybe they were going to work or a friend's house or whatever. Yeah. Didn't matter. She said that she had gone and gotten the gun and loaded it because she was home alone and she was worried about robbers. But when she loaded it, she remembered that she didn't know how to unload it. So she had been up in her room and she was trying to figure out how to get the ammunition back out, and she accidentally fired it, and it shot her mirror and it shot a hole in the ceiling.
Oh my God.
And so then she was like, well, I can't do this. So she heard her mom and Seth get home, and so she took the gun downstairs to get them to help. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then when, the whole story about when she tried to hand Seth the gun, it went off and it shot him, and then she panicked and she ran away. And they said, well, did you kill your brother on purpose? Did you intend to shoot him? And she said no. So At 3:08 p.m., while she's at the police office being interrogated, her mom and dad and Seth are at the hospital, and at 3:08 Seth is pronounced dead.
Oh,
He was 18.
that's sad.
Yeah. So, she was questioned for a little while longer, and then that evening she was released into her parents' custody. And there are two versions of stories for this too. One of them goes that she was just so upset and emotionally just distraught, and they couldn't get anything out of her, and the questioning wasn't going well, and they figured, it's probably an accident. It would be better for her just to go home and sort of regroup, and then we'll keep the investigation open, and we'll come interview her again, but we don't think that she's a flight risk. We think this was probably an accident. We just need to ask some more questions.
Okay.
So that was like the official story. The other story was very strange because the police chief at the time was from out of the area. This was an extremely small town.
Yeah.
And the police chief was from out of the area, and he had come in with this idea that he was going to like clean up corruption in the police department.
Mm-hmm.
And so
big job, but okay.
Yeah. Well, but it's a small town of
I know, but those are the worst
yeah,
ones.
yeah, you're right. That's true. So, he didn't like people fixing tickets. He was a real hard ass. He was really, like stick to the rules and by the book kind of guy.
Yeah.
But, and everybody was afraid of him. Like everybody that worked for him was intimidated by him and would do whatever he said, even though they didn't really like him. So this story goes that Judy marched into the police station and asked to see him by his first name, which was John. And that after she talked to him in his office for a few minutes, he came out and ordered them to let her take Amy home. And everybody was like, well, that's not kosher and it seems out of character, but we're going to do it if you tell us to.
Yeah.
And so they did. So either way, Amy goes home with her mom.
Hmm.
So Amy goes home. She climbs into her mom and dad's bed. And she basically hides out there for a couple of months. Like she is there
get out of my
a
bed.
lot. Well, I think they're all just distraught. I mean,
Yeah.
it was horrible, horrible. So while the parents and Amy and Seth and everybody had been out of the house, a bunch of neighbors came over because, like I said, this was a really small, like tight-knit kind of town. And they didn't want for Judy and Sam and Amy to come back home and find like Seth all over the floor. And so they went in and they cleaned the kitchen for them so that they wouldn't have to see it when they got home. So mom gets home, Judy gets home, and she goes into the kitchen and she's sitting there, and a friend of hers who may have actually kind of been a neighbor or a tenant, like it sounded like she could have lived on the property, but it wasn't really clear. She came over and she's talking to Judy, and she had a grandparent who was a cop, a grandfather, and had been thinking that it was kind of odd that Amy was already home
Yeah.
after, Seth had just died, and this just happened this afternoon. And
Yeah.
but while she's thinking this and she's trying to comfort Judy, she looks around the kitchen and she notices that they didn't do a stellar job cleaning the kitchen.
Oh no.
And there's little bits of blood and like
body.
flesh,
Yeah.
on the appliances.
Oh.
And so she's like, you know what, hon, let's just go in the other room. You don't need to be in here. This is not a healthy place for you to be. And like leads her out of the room and comforts her or whatever.
Yeah.
So, they go to the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
There's an open casket. Amy is at the funeral.
Oh.
Sam and Judy, dad and mom, are like holding on to her the whole time, just keeping her really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently she looked like a zombie. She was practically catatonic. She wasn't able to reply to anybody. It was awful.
Yeah.
She never received any kind of therapy after that because, for one thing, in the late 80s,
Yeah, it wasn't
you
a
didn't do
thing,
it.
really.
Yeah. I mean, like, some people went to see therapists, but it wasn't like, this child needs counseling because of this traumatic event.
Yeah.
Plus, her dad wasn't really sold on the idea, so they didn't send her.
Like most dads, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. The medical examiner ruled Seth's death an accident pending a police investigation. So looks like it could definitely be accidental. I don't have any proof that it's not unless they uncover some more evidence.
Yeah.
We'll just say it's an accident. 2 days later, Chief John Polio made a statement that said to the press that said, every indication at this point in time leads us to believe it was an accidental shooting. And then 11 days after the shooting, so 9 days after that, Brian Howe, who was a state trooper working with the DA's office, and then 2 of the police officers from their town came to the house and interviewed everybody. Brian concluded that Seth's death was a result of an accidental discharge of a firearm. Case closed.
Wow.
So no charges ever filed.
Mm-hmm.
So Amy doesn't fare well after the death of her brother. She slept in the bed with her parents for months. She would just try, starting out in her bed, and then in the middle of the night, she'd just have to come crawl in bed with them. She couldn't be alone. She wouldn't leave the house. Her friends would come over, and they had to, coax and coax and coax to get her to even leave for months afterward.
Wow.
The family didn't move out of the house. They decided that they were going to stay. And so they would all eat their meals in the kitchen where she killed her brother.
Yeah.
And they left his bedroom exactly as it had been.
Yeah.
And so she would walk to her room and walk right past his room with his name that he had hand carved in some woodshop class hanging on the door. And it was just constant reminders.
Yeah.
And her mom didn't do very well either. She said sometimes she'd be driving down the road and she'd see some kid on a bike, and from behind he would kind of resemble Seth. Mm-hmm. And she would think, oh my God, thank God there's been some kind of mistake. He's not dead.
Oh, yeah.
He's right there. And then she'd pull up next to him and realize it wasn't him.
That's sad.
It was awful. So at the wake, so at the funeral, there was a guy there that Amy knew from school named Jim Anderson, who came basically to support her. They were kind of friends at school. They started dating. And then in 1989, so 3 years later, they got married at the church where they had held the funeral, which is
Small
sad,
town.
but yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah. And also kind of, a making happy memories, I don't know, or honoring him in some way, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sam Bishop, her dad, in all of his fatherly wisdom, told her that one way that she could overcome the loss of her brother was to create new life herself. So in 1991, she had a baby named Lily.
Okay.
And then shortly after that, she had 2 more children, Thea and Phaedra. And friends of hers described her as a very loving mother. She was kind of high strung, but she tried to do what was best for her kids. She bought all organic food before it was cool.
Yeah. She's the trendsetter.
That's right. She worried about whether or not her children were being challenged enough at school. She enrolled them in all sorts of music classes and encouraged them to develop that. And then in 2001, she gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Seth. He was born on what would have been her brother's 33rd birthday.
Right? How strange.
And also heartbreaking.
Yes.
Also, anyway. So Amy started writing shortly after this, which was probably mostly for therapy. She ended up writing 3 books. They were all dark thrillers, but she never published anything. And it wasn't really clear whether that was because she couldn't get it published or she just never
didn't want to.
Yeah, that just wasn't the point. But the reason that I think they were probably mostly therapy is that a lot of the themes in her books were very similar to things that had gone on in her life. For example, some of her characters used having babies as sort of a symbolic redemption kind of thing. I can give birth to this super innocent thing and it'll make me innocent. And then one of her characters names her son after some child that she knew that had died named Luke. And then she worries that she won't be able to watch her son grow up because what if he looks like Luke, and will she be able to watch him play and run around and have a good life knowing this other kid is dead? And so it was very much like Amy's life. She also discovers religion and she joins a church, which is weird because she's in a doctoral program to become a scientist. So it doesn't quite fit with church.
Yeah.
But also in her book, she has a lot of characters that really struggle with forgiveness and deliverance from sin and all of that kind of stuff. So it was definitely something that was inside her that she was trying to fix. So then there was a strange thing that happened. On Saturday morning, just a Saturday morning in 2002, they went to, her whole family, her husband, her 4 kids, went to IHOP for breakfast. Seth, the new Seth the second, I don't know. the baby Seth, yes, wasn't very old. He was still a toddler, and so he needed a booster seat, but it was a really busy day, and when they got there, they had just given the last booster seat away to another family, so there wasn't one for Seth.
Okay.
And apparently, Amy just flipped her shit.
Oh.
And she went over to the other woman who had gotten the booster seat, and she started screaming and cussing her out.
Oh my God.
She was mad because she said they got there first and the other family got seated first or got the booster seat first, and it should have been theirs. And the whole time that she's cussing her out, she's screaming, "I'm Dr. Amy Bishop," over and over again. Like that, like, do you know who I am?
Yeah.
Right. So they were asked to leave.
Yeah.
And before they left, Amy walked back over to this woman who's a complete stranger, who she's mad at because she was given a booster seat in an IHOP, and punched her in the head.
Oh my God.
Then they tried to leave, but Amy was arrested. But no, all the charges were dropped. So she didn't ever go to court or anything for it. So her friends and family said at this point she was like doing a whole bunch of research, and she was also the sole breadwinner of the family, and she had 4 small children, and it was just a very, very stressful time, and they feel like she just kind of cracked.
Yeah.
And it just was maybe the last straw in a long line of things that were rough for her.
Gosh.
Jim, her husband, never really worked. He never obtained any sort of advanced degree, which was really important to Amy. She felt like that was what made her a good person. And really the only jobs he ever had were like temporary lab jobs that Amy got him.
Oh.
So
like same field?
Yeah, but not
as good as her?
Not as good as her.
Yeah.
And he was not motivated, and he just didn't do a lot of work. So she pretty much did it all. Okay. So she did have a lot of pressure. So then Amy gets accepted in the tenure track at the University of Alabama. And in 2003, they moved to Alabama so that she can take the job. And it seems like it's just going to be a new start for them, right?
Yeah.
After this IHOP incident and leaving behind her hometown, and they can just start fresh. She and Jim start to collaborate on this project, this research thing that she's working on. She's going to invent an automated cell incubator, which is just going to revolutionize medical research, essentially. Actually, the president of the university, whose name is David Williams, predicted that the device would change the way biological and medical research is conducted. It was just going to be huge.
Wow.
And they were collaborating on it. So Jim was actually working, and they were getting along. Everything was great. Amy was really, really focused on pursuing patents for this invention. However, that meant she wasn't focused on writing research papers, which is something you have to do when you're a professor on a tenure track. And several times they warned her, you really need to publish more. You're really falling short of what the university expects. You can't be tenured if you don't do this. And she just ignored it. So then when she applied in the spring, it was denied. So that's probably why she wasn't so upset with Deborah, because it was really all stuff that she did.
Yeah.
So she filed a bunch of appeals. She hired a lawyer. Nothing happened. Nothing helped. So after this mass murder at her work, she offered these excuses, which were very interesting to me because they weren't ever mentioned anywhere else in her life until she was caught for this like massive killing.
Yeah.
She said since childhood, she had suffered from allergies, which could manifest as hives or eczema, which we know. She had allergies and asthma and went to the ER. She said, but in the months before the shootings at the school in Alabama, she was under a lot of stress and she had begun to hallucinate. And she said the same thing happened right after Seth had died. She started to hear voices, which were sometimes scary and sometimes not. And they had, in times of great stress and allergy issues, so like when her allergies were acting up and she was really stressed, she would also hear these voices like on and off for years and years.
Oh my God.
So that all came out. One day before the shootings, Amy had driven to the university and she was parked outside the admin building. And from her car, she called. She said she was there to talk to the president about her case and she was going to come up, and she was told, no, you shouldn't even come in the building. She said then she sat in her car and she saw the president and the provost being escorted to their cars by the police as if she was like going to attack them. She's told a friend, it's like they think I'm going to walk in and shoot somebody, which may be where the idea came from.
Yep. Jeez.
So originally her defense team planned on being not guilty of declaring that she was not guilty by reason of insanity, related to the voices, related to the stress, related to the fact that she was, by all accounts, a pretty normal person who then killed a bunch of people, and that's not right. But it wasn't a good plan. For one thing, in Alabama, they never accept that as a defense. It's the tiniest percentage of a time. They just don't believe it. Also, they brought in all kinds of people to test her, and all the tests were inconclusive, so she wasn't even insane. And eventually they took a plea deal, which got her life without parole instead of death.
Wow.
So then they started looking into her brother's case.
Yep.
And they had some issues. Cold cases are really hard to investigate. The shooting of Seth Bishop had not been treated as a crime from the moment it happened.
Yeah.
No investigation was done. And there was no physical evidence collected and retained. Even the shotgun, after they did a ballistics test and definitely matched it to Seth's, the bullet that shot him, they didn't keep it. Like, I don't know where it ended up, but they didn't keep it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Because they just,
Yeah.
it was a horrible tragedy in a small town, and they were people they knew, and there was no reason to keep boxes of stuff. Right. So, but they did have some other evidence against her. They were really bothered by a couple of things. They were bothered by the fact that at the house they had found the box of ammunition. It was a 25 round box, and it was sitting on Amy's bed, and 4 rounds had been taken out. Okay. Because they'd never used the gun. It was just for protection. They had 1 box of ammunition, 1 gun. She brought him into her room to load it and took out 4 bullets. The first was the shot that happened in her room and was the hole in her ceiling. Then after, with this kind of shotgun that she had, it was a pump action shotgun. So like you see in the movies where between each shot, they have to like pump it to expel the spent round and get the next one in the chamber. So after she fired the shot in her bedroom, she would have had to have done that again before she went downstairs in order for it to have shot Seth. So that was upsetting. But also, so that was bullet number 2, killed her brother. Bullet number 3, when they arrested her, it was in the gun and ready to fire. She had done it again after leaving the house.
Wow.
And the 4th one was in her pocket. So that was kind of upsetting. The other thing they found were some photos. There hadn't really been an investigation of any kind, but they had taken just some cursory photos. And in one of them, they saw something that could have been a clue. It was a picture of Amy's room, and there was a copy of the National Enquirer on the floor. And so they got a copy from that date, and they looked through it, and they found that most of it was devoted to the murder of the parents of Patrick Duffy, who was an actor on Dallas. I don't know. That on November 18th, 1986, there were 2 men who had killed Duffy's parents, and in the bar that they owned, they used a 12-gauge shotgun. They fled the scene. They tried to use the weapon to steal a getaway car. And they were like, that sounds kind of familiar. What if she read this article and was like, that's what I'm going to do?
Oh my God.
So, but they couldn't prove it. And like I said, everything about the investigation was totally compromised. They didn't have any of the evidence. And even if they had gone after it like a murder investigation, by the time they got home that evening, neighbors had already come in and cleaned up all of the evidence in the kitchen.
That's true.
Because they had scrubbed it all down. So, in April 2010, the authorities officially opened an inquest into Seth's death, and some 20 witnesses came forward, including Tom Pettigrew, who was the one who was at the auto shop, who said that Amy had pointed the gun at them and told them to put their hands up. Then they referred the case to a grand jury in June, and Amy Bishop was indicted for the first-degree murder of her brother. And this whole time, remember, she's already in prison for the murder of all these people at work. So 2 days later, after she hears this, she's in jail in Alabama. She pops the blade out of a safety razor and slashes her wrists.
Oh my God.
And because she has a good understanding of anatomy. She knows that you don't slash your wrists like little teenagers do in movies. You slash them up your arm, and she knows exactly where to cut. She collapses in her cell and is just bleeding profusely, and a guard comes across her minutes before she would have died and manages to save her.
Oh my God.
Yep. So there was still some question at that point about whether or not Massachusetts would press charges. Like, they had indicted her, but whether they wanted to like actually proceed. And even at the time they didn't, but even at the time they thought probably not, because it was a cold case. It was really hard to prove. There wasn't a lot of evidence.
Wow.
Plus the local authorities sort of pointed out, like, if we were to try her for this crime, our goal would be life in prison, and she's already serving that. So it's not a good use of our time and our money.
Yeah. That's a crazy roller coaster story.
Right? Wasn't it just all horribly heartbreaking?
I keep thinking about how she kept chasing the lady and shooting, but the gun was jammed.
I know.
Like, can you imagine your luck?
That
gun
only
jammed?
happens in movies.
Yeah, like
it only happens when that's the only way that the main character could not end up dead.
I cannot imagine that.
Like, or I ran out of ammunition right as I was shooting you.
That's so crazy to me.
Right? No, there's so much in this that I was like, just chills. The part where her son was born on her brother's birthday.
Oh yeah.
And just
that was a crazy story.
Right? It doesn't even seem real.
No. Mine is not that crazy.
It's not that crazy.
No, it's not. But it's funny that you mention it, because mine was a cold case.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Because I was like, you know what? I need to see if a cold case actually gets solved. And usually it does, but I was reading an article that had like a bunch of different cold cases that were solved from different reasons. So one, like a lot of them ended up being because technology is now advanced enough to
so
redo
they had
it.
the DNA, and now they can look at the DNA.
Yeah,
they had the fingerprint, now they can put them in the database.
A lot of them were like, when they saved it, they were hoping that the future would have something that would look at this. And then
now it does.
Now we do. So
that's actually kind of crazy to think about.
I know. So I was like, that's kind of cool. So I was like, well, let me keep reading. I found one, and this one was really, I don't know. It was cool because it wasn't anything having to do with DNA or a confession. Like all the other ones are a DNA or a confession. So I was like, okay. This one happened. Let's see. Let's go back and talk about what happened.
All right.
May 1971. Mm-hmm. Two South Dakota.
I wasn't born yet.
No, me neither. Two South Dakota teens just vanished. They were both 17 years old, and their names were Pam Jackson and Cheryl Miller. Sometimes she went by Sherry, so that confused me reading all these articles. You can only imagine. So finally I found the one article that said, oh, and Cheryl goes by Sherry. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking there's a third person.
So wait, her name was Sherry Miller?
Yeah.
I work with a Sherry Miller. She's one of like 4 people that have my job in the whole district.
Oh my God.
I know.
I mean, I know for a fact this isn't her, but that's creepy.
Right.
That's weird.
All right, so your girl must end up dead or something horrible.
So let's see. Oh, okay. They were heading to a party. It was kind of like end of the school year. They were about to graduate, so it was like a big party at this gravel pit. So all I could think about it is the same as like all those movies you see where kids are partying in like the sand pit or the quarry, you know what I mean? Like they always go to the weird. So they went to a gravel pit.
There's woods nearby,
and they can party and be okay, and that's fine.
There's
so
a bonfire.
They never made it to the party.
Oh.
And their friends were like, they were just right behind us. Like, I don't know. All of a sudden, they were just gone. It was like, all of a sudden, we just thought we were driving too fast, and then they never showed up behind us again.
Oh, my gosh.
So I was like, what happened? So I was like freaking myself out. So police searched the area that, you know, they would have taken to get there.
Right, the route, right.
They found like absolutely nothing, so they just assumed foul play, like, you know, someone hijacked. I don't know. Someone took them. So that was their one thing because they couldn't find anything.
They wouldn't assume that they just decided to drive off. I would think if they didn't find any evidence, they would assume they had run away.
I think that, like, I don't think it fit them. Like, they were, like, good girls. They were on their way to this party that they were very excited about. On the way to meet the friends, like, to head to the party, they went and visited one of their grandmothers. Like, that was what, like, that's the type of people they are. They took their time out of their day to go visit grandma before going to a party.
Right.
So, they didn't find anything, and it, like, this, I mean, not that the case went cold then, but it did for a long time. So from 71 to just about 2004, it was kind of just a cold case.
Wow.
So even then, 2004, they went to this Union County. There's a farm in Union County, and they were searching this farm because the family that owned the farm, I guess it was the son, and then ended up being the owner of the farm. His name was David Lykken. Guys, I have no idea how I'm saying this, but I'm just gonna make it Lykken. Lykken.
Sure.
Yeah. Right?
Sure. Lykken.
So,
I don't know how else you'd say it.
No, I don't know either. So he was a classmate of theirs the year that they went missing, and he was, for unrelated purposes, he was already kind of in the public eye because he... Hold on, wait. Okay, yeah, I want to make sure I was telling you about the right person. I was like,
because
wait,
he's not a character in this story. Let's start over.
No, so yes. So he was found with, it said unrelated bones, so it wasn't their bones, but bones
oh my God.
at the farm,
human
clothing,
bones,
photos, a purse, and other items. They were like, oh my God. I'd be like, stop it. No quilts needed. But they didn't find a car. So they were trying to connect it to these two girls who went missing, but they couldn't. But he was already in trouble for kidnapping and raping in another case. So he was already like a really bad guy. So the police, I don't blame them for looking at him.
Sure.
He was a classmate. He was a nice guy. They found all this stuff that they couldn't necessarily connect to the disappearance of these two girls, but connected to someone.
Right.
So like I can understand that.
So he definitely murdered people though, because he had human bones and clothes and all of that stuff. Somebody murdered somebody?
That's what I was trying to figure out. I couldn't find anything saying that he was definitely charged with murder. I can only find that he was in a case of kidnapping and rape.
Gotcha.
But he also was given 227 years in prison.
Oh, yeah.
So he did a lot.
Than
I was like,
and
so
rape.
he did a lot.
It's like kidnapping and rape and then murder.
Yeah. So he was just obviously a creepy guy, not a very good guy.
No kidding.
I wouldn't
Were there
blame
pigs
them.
on the farm?
I hope not.
There are always pigs.
I don't even want to think about it. I almost gagged.
She's like, wait, I might throw up.
Okay, no. I just didn't want to be like gagging my whole life away. So I really had to think about that one. So they dug up this guy's farm forever. They pretty much cleared the whole farm. They dug.
Sure.
They were so convinced it was him.
Really.
And
there was a lot of circumstantial evidence.
And I was like,
there.
and after all those years, you just want it to be solved.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like, I think people forget that. Not that you have to have obviously evidence connecting you, but I think you want it to be there so bad that you kind of like get tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And focus on the one person you really want it to be.
Well, he seems like a good fit.
Yeah. And
like, it seems like that's how the story should end.
Well, it doesn't end because he has no connection to it, because they even had like an in the jailhouse like informant come forward and say, oh, well, he admitted to taking those two girls and killing them. Like, he admitted to it. Like,
the two missing girls?
Yep. So, obviously they're like, oh my God, okay, well, this is our like little informant or little rat. So
yeah,
let's get him. And they were talking to him, talking to David, and he was like, what? So they ended up charging him for 2 counts of premeditated murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts for disappearance in murder. So, like, 2 and 2 and 2, like, 1 for each of them. So, he had all these charges. He's already in prison for literally more than double his lifetime.
Yeah.
But I think they just wanted justice. So, they were like, no, we're going to charge him again. Well, then, I guess when it made its way to actually go to trial, the charges were dropped because the informant ended up saying, oh, well, I might have lied about that.
Right. That seems to happen a lot.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I was just pissed with him that day.
Yeah. So he was just like, I told you I wasn't doing this. And so his family started getting frustrated with the whole case because they're digging up their farm and everyone started looking at them differently. And, you know.
They were already looking
either
at them
way,
differently.
Yes. But I think because for years this has been the case.
Right.
That it's like if someone found the Colonial Parkway murder. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that whole family would be so shunned because it's been such a case around here for so long.
Yeah.
So
even if that person was already in prison for something else, it'd be like, oh, and this? Yeah, okay.
So
I can see that.
The attorney for the family ended up stating that they wanted a formal apology for, you know, because they proved his innocence. Like, he didn't do anything connected to this. Like, leave him alone. He's serving his time for what he did wrong. Like, but they want an apology because, yeah, he's in prison. So even if they exiled him, that's still their property now that they're getting tore up for, you know, years on end. So, of course, the main guy in charge was like, well, I'm not going to apologize for doing my job.
Right.
I'm sorry that happened to you, though.
Suspect.
Yeah. So he handled it really well. Then, so fast forward even more, end up being 43 years after they were, like, just gone one day, that they finally figured out what had happened. 43 years. Can you imagine that?
I'm really surprised that anybody was still looking.
43 years. I feel like their parents and, like, siblings were still alive.
Sure,
so
they
I feel
still
like
cared.
But
that can't be a priority in a police station
and
anymore.
I don't think, like, police were not actively looking. It kind of went back to being a cold case after the one lead they were so certain could have been it went down the drain. You know, that kind of went back. So it ended up being that in September 2013, a fisherman was out in the creek that was close to the bridge where they would have to go. And with the extreme, like, I don't want to be like, global warming's real, y'all, but you guys already know this. So with the water levels being extremely low, lower than they've ever been before, he could see a part of a rusted metal bumper.
Oh my gosh.
So he, you know, everybody calls it in. They come and look, whatever. They ended up finding the car in the creek.
Oh my gosh.
That they did look, but in 71, it was feet and feet and feet, yards probably deeper than what it was at now. So I know. I was like, oh, this poor thing. So it's like a whole big rust bucket. I mean, the car was older than 71 anyways.
Yeah.
So it was already an old car.
And it had been down there for over 40 years.
Yes. So it was upside down. He saw it, you know, the rusted part partially sticking out. But the vehicle they kind of deemed to be in an accident. So after they did some, I don't know how to say it, like, they didn't do the mechanical test yet, but just like first glance stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the tires had been popped and they could tell that the car was left in third gear. So they were, you know, driving at normal pace and keys were still in the ignition and the lights were on, like indicated that they were on the dash.
Right.
Like the thingy.
It was turned or whatever.
So then
they thought it was an accident more than falling off a bridge?
Yeah, the bridge was brand new at the time. So they knew that they would know if the bridge would have been broken. You know what I mean? Like, it was a new bridge. Okay. But they were thinking that it took the girls by surprise and that they might have been going a little too fast and that one thing led to another, they ended up in the creek. So one of the tires was completely popped, like ripped up. So they don't know if that happened and that's why they went into the creek, or if that happened on the way. Like, so they don't know where that happened in the path, but one tire was messed up. And what was this? Oh, the big thing that they were talking about is that there was no, I don't want to say foul play because that wasn't it, but there was no proof of drunk driving or anything. Like, normally there are like beer cans or bottles or something in the car.
They weren't doing anything wrong.
No, yeah. So they were both, the bodies were both up front, which they weren't really bodies at this point.
No.
But a lot of things were really well preserved in there. So they ended up pulling out, I think it was Sherry Miller's purse with her ID, notes from her classmates that were still like legible, like you could still read.
Wow.
I was like, this is like the Titanic when he finds the painting, like when the sketch.
Right? Was it just like her purse was waterproof?
I think that in the car there was only but so much, like water is fine.
Right. There was like a pocket of air.
But I think I was trying to figure this out. I'm like, they didn't get out. So I don't think any glass was broken. I don't think any windows were down. Mm-hmm. I think that it filled up with water, but then that's it. No current really got in there to wish anything around. I don't think any little, I don't know,
animals,
fish or anything got in there.
Oh,
so
yuck. Then
I think it was just like a little sealed bag under water.
Wow.
So, because photos were even found of, like, her friends and stuff in the purse.
Oh, my
Notes,
gosh.
her ID. It just freaked me out. But, I don't know. I'm like, why is that so emotional to me right now?
Yeah. This is almost scarier than, like, a murderer because it's just nobody did anything wrong.
Yeah. And then these families had to live with years of not knowing.
Right, and thinking, oh my gosh, what were the last moments like? Are they alive?
Yeah.
Did someone take them?
So this is probably the saddest thing. But then my story's over. I'm sorry.
Great.
So, Pam Jackson's father died 5 days before they found the car.
Oh no.
And a big part of his obituary was never knowing what happened to his daughter. And like that was like I don't want to say that was his life, but that was a big chunk of his life was figuring out
40
and
years.
like where to go, or where'd she go. And so that was sad. I was like, oh my god, 5 more days and you could have known before you died.
Oh my gosh.
I know, that made me really sad. So
this is depressing, Jordan.
I know, I'm sorry, but it's like the whole closure thing. The family was given the remains, and like to the point where they knew nothing, like no foul play was taken with them because all of their clothes was normal. Nothing was missing. They were in the front seat. They weren't in the trunk or the back seat or anything like that. Like, they think it was just an accident, and it was just such a bad accident. They never figured it out. I was like, that is so sad to be right there. So after this car was found in this creek in Oklahoma, they started using this like sonar detector thing. And in one of their lakes, it was like Foss Lake or something like that, they found 2 separate cars with 3 bodies in each car.
Oh my god.
They had no idea.
Missing.
Yep.
Were those also accidents, or do you know?
I don't know about those ones. They just kind of touched on it, but I was like, that's crazy that you never know what could be in the lake around the corner. You're at the beach with your family.
Right.
I was like, oh my gosh, because I grew up on a lake.
Swim except in swimming pools.
Because I was like, oh my god, what if there was something in my lake and I didn't know?
Right. Well, we've been recently swimming at a lake out in Tennessee. There was very unlikely anything in that lake because it was a reservoir and they drained it once a year, and I feel like they would know. But still.
Oh
my gosh.
The families got, the remains to do a burial and to handle it. And I just, that was just so sad. But one of the spokespeople, like the families were there when they had like a news, I don't know what you want to call it.
Like a press conference or
something.
Kinda,
yeah. So one of the representatives talked to them, and they're saying that they've been going through their whole life on this journey trying to find any answer pertaining to this case. And they're like, well, now, we'll be able to finish this journey knowing the answers and be able to close this chapter. I was like, that's
yeah, but
sad.
at that point, it's such a huge part of your life. Do you know what to do next?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. That's eerie to me.
So I know there wasn't any like true crime.
I was going to say I should call you out on the fact that wasn't a true crime.
I know, but I had to do it because I was so certain that one guy
Had
was
done
the
it.
one. I was like, no one gets over 200 years in prison and not kidnap these two girls.
Right.
So I was too invested in the story not to do it. So I was
Right.
like, you know what? Whatever. I need to do it.
I hope it was. I mean, they must have died or become unconscious and then died really, really quickly. If they didn't try to get out and they were all intact and
Yeah.
the car was all intact, and
I just can't imagine
so
that.
at least there's that. Well,
I just wanted to make it even more depressing today.
I was going to say, I thought mine was going to be the super sad one.
I mean, yours is super
Mine
sad.
was super sad too.
But
All the sad stories. Okay then.
switching it up.
So I'm going to try to lighten it up a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not really in the mood to lighten it up at all right now. But so we can't, of course, read any of Amy's stories, the girl from
No.
My Story, because and they're not on Audible, so we can't download them.
No.
However, if you would like to support our podcast,
Yes.
and you would like to get a free month of Audible
Guys.
and
seriously.
a free book, then you could go to audibletrial.com/crimecrazy and start your trial and download your free book. And even though you can't download anything written by Amy, you could download this book that we found today called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes.
I have no idea what it's about. It sounds hilarious.
I like
That's
it
my
already.
recommendation for the week. And then I guess I better not put my phone away because I have another story.
I know.
All right. So, this story. So I was sick this weekend and I spent a lot of time laying on the couch, like 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just reading on my phone. I didn't sleep for 3 days either. So I read a lot on my phone.
Oh.
And I came across a story, which led to another story, which led to another story.
Oh my
And so I'm
God.
going to tell you all three of them.
Oh my God.
But it's really, really short.
Okay.
And they're kind of hilarious.
I'm excited.
They're
then.
hilarious. They're not hilarious. I understand that there are implications that are very serious, but like on the surface, they're hilarious.
Okay.
So, September 14th of this year. So, a
Oh.
couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was a Thursday. In Orange County, California, people were watching TV and a whole bunch of people all over the area suddenly had whatever they were watching interrupted by an emergency broadcast. Okay. Warning of extraterrestrial invasions and the beginning of the Armageddon.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
You can listen on YouTube. So if you want to, go Google it, I'm sure you can find it. So there were two sort of separate things. The first one is this voice that's kind of whispery and like talking under its
Ew.
breath or whatever. And it says the space program made contact with. They're not what they claim to be. They've infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment, particularly Area 51. The disasters are coming. The military, I'm sorry, the government knows about them. So that was the first part, which is audio that came from a call that Art Bell, who was the host of a conspiracy-themed radio show,
Yeah.
in 1997, he received this call from a man who was pretending to be or claiming to be a former Area 51 employee. And so somehow the audio of that call, the hackers got it. And so they put it in there. The second voice was like a booming voice, and it was warning that extremely violent times will come. And that audio came from a Christian radio program called Insight for Living with Chuck Swindoll.
Oh.
Which
Good
when
old
I
Chuck.
first read it, I was like, this is Insight for Living with Chuck? That's not what it means. It's Insight for Living with Chuck Swindoll.
Oh.
I'm like, why do we need... I'm not living with
Yeah.
Chuck. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the article also mentioned this has happened before.
Oh my God.
So the first time, which is like one of the more memorable ones, is in 1987 in Chicago. These hackers went in the same thing through like the emergency broadcast system. Apparently that's been kind of the way to get in, because all of the stations on all of the networks are connected to the emergency broadcast system in case there's an emergency that needs to be broadcast. So if you can get into that, you can get into everything instead of like trying to hack individual places and whatever else. So 1987, they broadcast footage, and I watched this video and it was very upsetting. It's Max Headroom. I don't know who that is, but apparently it was important. It's a man in a Max Headroom mask, and he talks for a while, and he puts on a glove and takes off a glove, and you can't really understand anything he's saying. They had sort of a partial transcript in the video, or in the article that the video was in. And so I'm sure that there's something that's maybe like closed captioned or whatever. I couldn't understand most of what he was saying. It was all garbled and whatever else. But then the second scene is his butt, and he has his pants pulled down, and he's like bent over, and this person who looks like she's probably a woman, like you can't see her head, it's just like her torso and her arm, is smacking his butt with a fly swatter. It was very upsetting. Ew. I didn't like it. They never caught anyone. But then in 2013 in Montana and Michigan at 8:36 p.m. on Monday, February 9th, in both states, well, not both states on that Monday, but both states that week, had their programming interrupted with messages scrolling across the bottom of the screen that said, "Dead bodies are rising from their graves." And the alert said, "Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from the grave and attacking the living." And it said a voice warned not to approach or apprehend these bodies as they are extremely dangerous. So
the zombie apocalypse?
Yeah. They said, so, the nature of the message, all of those, they're not dangerous or threatening or whatever else. They're silly, and they're obviously silly. It's not even like they're trying to trick people into panicking, and no one was fooled. Yeah. However, the fact that you can hack into one of those systems is a problem, because if there was a national emergency that was like maybe some kind of attack, and the people who were attacking knew how to hack in and shut that off, we would lose that major aspect of communication.
That's true.
However, I would think that's much less of a problem now. I feel like half the people I know don't have any form of TV except like internet TV. And it's not going to show up on internet TV. And we all have cell phones. So maybe less of an issue, but still important. Yeah. They did arrest somebody in 2013. Oh. However, they didn't press any charges. They interviewed him a whole lot to sort of find out how it was done. And so since they never pressed any charges, we don't know who he or she was. That's probably, now. Works for the FBI with Penelope Garcia. Yeah. 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 So yeah.
Crazy.
Right. I have to tell these things. That one video was really upsetting. I was watching it and I was like, what am I watching? Do I have a fever? Like, what is going on? I'm hallucinating. Maybe I was. Maybe it's not upsetting and I really was hallucinating.
Everyone lets us know on Twitter, like, it was fine.
It was fine. It just wasn't interesting at all. I could understand everything he said. Are you okay? Full disclosure, I had like a 2-day migraine. Yeah. However, I'm fairly certain it was upsetting. Anyway,
headache.
So yeah, that's a better story. No one actually got hurt.
Yeah.
Well, except me watching that video. It was really upsetting. So anyway, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
I don't think so. I don't know.
We are working on and seeking input for our next goal. I think we've identified the goal. Right? Our target. Like how many downloads we want to do our next. But we don't have our prize figured out.
We'll think about it. Yeah. It always comes up randomly in conversation.
Well, yeah, but maybe somebody has a really great idea.
Okay. Well, then if they do, they should let us know.
They definitely should let us know.
It has to be something fun, though.
Yeah. And different. Something that we don't do all the time.
Yeah.
Because our first one, we went to the escape room, which neither of us had ever done. That was so much fun.
Yes.
And then we went to the psychic.
Yep.
Which you had done.
Yes.
I had never done.
I go a lot.
It's kind of weird.
Well, but it's because everyone I know always wants to go. So then I'm always the guinea pig to go. Well, I'll go first so you know what it's like.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep. I've done that with at least 3 people. Nope, probably 4.
Huh.
Yeah.
Me included.
Yep.
It was interesting.
I liked it.
I'm not having a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of kids.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. She's sitting here looking at me like, oh, yeah, sure. Whatever you say. You tell yourself that all you want.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. It could be a puppy.
I'll
get one, too.
I'll have a puppy. Oh, my God. Neither of us need any more puppies,
Yay.
Jordan. Then we'll have to remake our presents for people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Which,
worth it.
by the way, should have arrived.
Oh, yeah.
So, and more stuff is on the way for our Patreon supporters. And if you want presents that are puppy related, you can support us on Patreon and you will get all kinds of goodies like puppy related presents and strange digital presents that we send you and extra episodes and blooper reels and stickers and all kinds of fun stuff.
Guys, I'm just saying it's so worth it.
It is so worth it. Plus our everlasting love and devotion.
Always better
And
than
gratefulness.
anything.
Right. Which actually, I have somebody who is not a Patreon supporter who is a subscriber and listens, but also gets our everlasting love and devotion.
Okay.
And that is James Larson.
Oh.
Because he is the one that helped me out with sound stuff last week.
Yes.
When I could not figure it out and had tried 50 million times.
Oh, that was for the interview.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just was super, super patient and talked to me for a good hour on Facebook chat and walked me through everything. And then we got it working and yay, now it works.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're our hero. So you're still welcome to support us on Patreon, but you're our hero either way.
Either way, their love's still there.
That's right. So
I don't think I have anything else to say except for one important thing.
All right, I'm ready.
Don't end up on next week's episode.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Crime Crazy. We hope that you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed making it. If you like our show, please tell a friend, or better yet, subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. We really appreciate your feedback and want to give you a shout out on the next episode if you leave us a review. If you leave us a review somewhere other than iTunes, just let us know. If you loved our show, consider donating to our Patreon. We have lots of great surprises that we want to share with anyone who supports us. And let's be real, it's really just an excuse to send you cool stuff. Thanks again, and remember, even though we really have no idea what we're talking about, we'll be back next week to talk about it all over again.